I'm walking along one of Britain's many deserted and long forgotten railway branch lines. In this case, the Basingstoke Alton Light Railway. It was quite remarkable because it was Britain's first authorised light railway, and in its short operating life of under 30 years, it opened not once but twice, and likewise it closed twice. The track was ripped up twice, and in the interwar period it was used by the British film industry for 2 major feature films. Surely quite a unique achievement. So what is a light railway? Quite simply, it's a railway built to lighter engineering standards and with less government interference and cost. The track was lighter, the bends were sharper and the gradient steeper. This meant that the train speeds were slower, but at a time when the railway had a total monopoly, that was no problem. Traffic was light, and that was to be expected. And in a rural area such as this, the trade going out tended to be hay, straw, livestock, timber. Coming in, you had coal and building materials, plus every form of manufactured item you could think of. That was a light railway, and no one could have foreseen in 1900, when this line was being built, that it would have such a short life.
At least on the return journey.
Life was cut short by the First World War and then by the impact of the motor vehicle. The branch started from a bay platform at the western end of the newly built Basingstoke station. It followed the main line to the west of England and the south coast for half a mile, and then turned away sharply to the south, past the waterworks, and then went past the newly built Thornycroft Motorworks factory. It was falling on a gradient all the time until it crossed the River Loddon and then started a steep climb out of the valley over the downs, and it climbed for 596 feet on a continuous rising gradient of 1 in 50. That meant that the trains were small and slow, and they often stalled on the steep banks. It became an operating nightmare, especially in the winter, when a relief locomotive had to be sent out from Basingstoke. The Thornycroft factory has now disappeared and is a Morrison's supermarket, and the line out of Basingstoke has been obliterated by housing schemes and a dual carriageway road. However, the local council has put a short section of track in the middle of Viables roundabout to mark where the branch line passed through that site. As you leave the town, the track bed's been completely obliterated by factories and the M3. But the first village that the railway served is Cliddesden, and there it crossed over the village road by a bridge. That has been demolished, but one abutment remains, and a house has been built on the track bed, and as a reminder of the past use of the site, it's called Railways. I'm walking along the track from Basingstoke, approaching the first station on the line. This was at Cliddesden. The station itself is now totally obliterated. There's very little to be seen. But there are places still left if you know what you're looking for. Here was the level crossing. To my right, well, they are the station cottages built for the railway servants. Each one cost £258. And behind me is the tower, is the brick base on which the water tower was built that gave a water supply to the station and to the houses. And the line of trees that were built, the horse chestnuts, originally to break the wind on this very exposed site. Behind is the station master's house. The platform has now totally gone, but That slight rise in front of the horse chestnut trees shows where it once was. A tin corrugated iron shed was the station building. The station is still very exposed and very isolated, and it's not surprising that this was the least used station on the line. If the villagers had to walk 3/4 of a mile to the station, they might as well have started that walk towards Basingstoke and save themselves the fare. Very few people use this station, and it largely fell into disuse until 1937, when it was suddenly transformed by Gainsborough Pictures and immortally turned into Buggles Kelly in the Will Hay film Oh Mr. Porter. Just here, when they filmed Oh Mr. Porter, Gainsborough Pictures needed to ensure that the level crossing featured in the film. And so they built a signal box just there. Although the site is now forgotten, people come here every year to see where that famous comedy film was shot. It's lived in people's hearts forever, and it will do for years. It was at this very spot that the line's only passenger fatality was recorded. A local farmer had gone to market and was returning in the evening when he got off here at Cliddesden. He realised he'd made a mistake, and as the train was leaving the platform, he attempted to re-enter it. He clung to the side of the coach and unfortunately was crushed between the coach and the heavy post that supported the level crossing gate. He fell beneath the train and was killed instantly. He left a widow and 6 children. I'm at Winslade, a mile and a half south of Cliddesden. This is the largest engineering feature on the line, a truly remarkable tunnel built through a high embankment. This was necessary because the line had to climb up to a summit level of 596 feet. Light railways didn't normally have such heavy engineering features, but it was essential so that there could be a fairly even climb, even at quite steep gradients, up to that height. Most other bridges have gone, but this one remains and leads up to a permissive bridleway which takes us onto the railway line, which is obviously behind me. This embankment took an awful lot of time and manpower, and therefore here the contractor had his main labour force camping in iron shanties. There were an awful lot of these men, and they were living here for about 2 years. The conditions were indescribable, and if nothing is remaining here of the housing, well, there is something, and that's this nonconformist chapel, quite a relic, and it's quite unusual to find a spiritual remain from a shanty town built for rough and ready navvies. It's the only thing that's left, otherwise it's all gone. They expected to be here for some time, and you can see why. The earthworks are considerable. Engineering works on such a massive scale as this always cost a lot of money, and it's not surprising that this branch line, which was supposed to cost £68,000, overspent. The London and South Western Railway in the end had to spend £110,000 to build the 12.5 miles of line linking Basingstoke with Alton. Most of the line was built by hand, navvies using pick and shovel, but at the very end they used a steam navvy which speeded up construction considerably, and until, of course, the line was finished in 1901, which is when it opened for public service. I'm walking down the line towards Herriard Station, the crossing place and the most important station on the branch line. As you can see, it's in the 70 years since the last train ran, nature has reclaimed what the railway once used as its own. But there are still things to find, and beside the track I found this piece of fencing post lying there unused, unwanted for 70 years. This is Herriard Station, the most important station on the line, and the two platforms can still be seen today. Here at Herriard Station, the concrete platforms are still here, and in 1901 reinforced concrete was a modern material. This was always the busiest passenger station on the line, but the passenger figures just dropped like a stone. A competing bus service was introduced down the main road in 1928. After then, the numbers using this service became unsustainable, and it's not surprising that the last passenger train ran in 1932. Milk traffic sent in churns was always important from here, and it was sent on the local trains into Basingstoke, up to London, and the journey took 7 hours. One can only guess the condition of the milk by the time it got to its final destination. This platform was last used in 1916. When the last train ran in December of that year, the track was ripped up. But when the service was reinstated in 1924, the Southern Railway Company refused to put in the passing place, and so this platform was left unused. The passing service was never reinstated, and the very limited service was condensed into 8 hours, a man's shift. That way, the railway company could minimise costs. Their enthusiasm for the new service was certainly very lukewarm and limited. The last goods train came here in 1936. This is the end of the line. We've come down past all the stations, and now we are at Alton Park, a somewhat special station because this was built as a private station specifically for Lord Mayor Trelaw's Hospital, which is over here on the right. The hospital itself was used by what was then called crippled children, mainly children from London who were suffering from tuberculosis. Every week a special train ran down from London so that visitors could visit the children, and then in the afternoon it would go back to Waterloo. Alton Park was an unusual site, and the station had an unusual history. And this film shows quite clearly a 1923 shot of the visitors coming to the platform from the special train from London. The station is probably the best preserved of them all on the line, and is now owned by the local scout group. Something that's always fascinated me about this site is the amount of coal traffic that came here for the hospital. The winch that powered the wagons down to the powerhouse is still here. And here's the winch. This was used to power 3,000 tonnes of coal down into the hospital power station every year. That traffic was a valuable source of income for the railway company, but by the mid-60s it had become uneconomic, and so this site closed, and so closed the Basingstoke Alton Light Railway forever. Well, what makes the Basingstoke Alton Light Railway so special? It never paid its way. That certainly wasn't special. It only had a short lifetime, a very short lifetime. But the fact that it was closed, the local population only given 1 week's notice in 1916 that the track would go. But it was the people power that forced the railway company to reinstate the track, and that has never been achieved before or since. In Alton, to the west of the station, there were 3 railway lines. One went to Fareham, one to Winchester, and this one to Basingstoke. All were closed, but 2 of them were reopened. This one by people power, but the Mid-Hants Railway to Winchester, that line was opened as far as Alresford due to enthusiast power. And it can still be seen today, and it will give visitors an indication of what this line looked like in the mid-1930s.